It's become the world's most successful weed killer. Originally patented as a chemical pipe cleaner in 1964, 5 years later the agrochemical corporation Monsanto patented glyphosate as a herbicide. Since then, for over 40 years, it's turned into the base element of most herbicides, as it is said that it only kills weeds.
No chemical agent has been so well tested worldwide. This is simply because it receives so much attention due to its relative excellence.
If we would have to do without herbicides like glyphosate and go back to the old times and do the weed control by hand, it's impossible to do it at this stage. There are not enough farmers, there are not enough workers. It would increase the food prices to a level that people couldn't afford food anymore.
Industry and farmers' associations are raving about glyphosate and report that it's only toxic to plants, not for animals or humans. Yet from critical scientists, there's a different story.
It's tumorigenic. We proved that in vivo using Roundup.
And if the chemical is safe, the scientific evidence should be there, it should be publicly available, and people should be able to read it.
Every year, 650 million liters are sprayed on fields and gardens worldwide. Is this substance really so harmless? And who decides? Are the scientific studies independent? And what role do the experiences of farmers and animal breeders play? As early as 2000, Germany tested the risk of glyphosate for the EU. In 2015, this is happening again. The health evaluation is conducted by the German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment, BfR, in Berlin. Their assignment is to determine if glyphosate represents a risk for consumers, and if its use will continue to be permitted. For evaluation, Roland Soletsky and his colleagues surveyed over 1,000 studies. Already the first assessment in 2000 was in the hands of Roland Soletsky. He and his team survey industry and independent studies and evaluate their scientific merit and plausibility.
According to our comprehensive assessment of glyphosate, glyphosate is a strong eye irritant. This we already knew. Aside from that, we have found that the use of glyphosate as a herbicide presents no risk for carcinogenic effects, no toxic reproduction effects, no endocrine effects caused, no neurotoxic, immunotoxic effects provoked, if it is used according to the specifications, which are the basis of the evaluated studies. In total, 70,000 pages, most of which are written by the industry itself. Angelike Hilbeck of the scientific network ENSA has her doubts.
No authority is required to evaluate the raw data. They couldn't deal with the amount. They wouldn't be able to do anything else except analyze the raw data. They look at the summaries of studies with pre-processed information provided by Monsanto. I look at them regularly too. Processed averages if you're lucky, with or without statistics depending on the case.
The assessment was scheduled to be finished in August 2015, but shortly before completion, cancer experts of the WHO released conflicting information. Glyphosate is probably carcinogenic. Chris Portier, research consultant of the WHO and former director of the U.S. Office of Risk Assessment Research, informs the Agricultural Committee of the German Bundestag. Never before have two health agencies contradicted each other so openly.
Well, since the BfR has not used any of the epidemiological data, if they indeed believed that there was some association in the epidemiology studies, then in fact, the human exposure difference between the applicators and the public would be substantially smaller. Because IARC found the cancer finding to be genotoxic, the risk assessment for cancer would be remarkably different. In addition, because they find all of the animal cancer studies as negative, then again, it's hard for me to assess the risk assessment they've done for cancer because they have not done a risk assessment for cancer.
For the attending representatives of Monsanto and Syngenta, it's about the future of their billion-dollar market in Europe.
There is absolutely no reason for panic. Glyphosate is safe. It has been assessed as such for 40 years by authorities worldwide. It has been used for 40 years. We are convinced that a reassessment of the WHO IARC rating would result in a change in this classification.
In the Magdeburg region, Peter Gottschalk manages a modern multi-family farm with 34 employees on 3,500 hectares. Sustainable agriculture is important to the large operation. To minimize the erosion caused by plowing, they've used glyphosate-containing herbicides for 20 years. The remaining chemically killed plants prevent the topsoil from being eroded by water and wind.
If we had done another tillage, we would have worked the straw more into the soil, which would have sped up the decomposing process. To prevent this, for erosion protection reasons, we've used glyphosate. This way, all the unwanted plants die off. The bits of green that you can still see are barley grains that spilled over and sprouted after our treatment.
Spraying glyphosate before seeding kills the competing and infected plants. Traditionally, this was achieved through laborious plowing. 2 weeks after the glyphosate treatment, the field is clean enough to strip till. This protects against erosion, saves time, fuel, and machine costs. While making use of the benefits, Gottschalk tries to use as little glyphosate as possible with the support of computers.
This represents our mixture of water and glyphosate. This shows that we are using 2.5 liters of glyphosate per hectare, which is about half of the permitted amount.
Until 2014, grains were often sprayed just before harvest to synchronize the drying. Thereby, many glyphosate residues ended up in bread and cereal products. This practice has been restricted in Germany, but not in other EU countries.
We need to balance between the damaging and useful aspects. If carefully managed, and used only where it really makes sense, glyphosate is a very effective substance, causing relatively little damage, if at all.
In the meantime, in Germany alone, 35% of all agricultural fields are sprayed with glyphosate. Is it really so harmless and without long-term effects as believed by most farmers? Agricultural University Hohenheim. Plant physiologist Günther Neumann has specialized in root problems and nutrient intake for over 20 years. His institute investigates root formations and interactions under laboratory conditions and in the field.
These are the fine roots, densely covered by even finer root hairs, which are all responsible for taking in the nutrients from the soil as efficiently as possible.
He was contacted by a local agricultural office. Various farmers encountered mysterious damages on their fields. What was the cause? One can see the damage even from above. The green areas were treated with glyphosate for only 2 years, the faded ones for 11. The same phenomenon occurred on 5 other fields in the surrounding area.
On the same field, in the areas treated longer with glyphosate, we found severely restricted root growth, with far fewer fine roots, which is of course noticeable in the plant growth. We conducted a state-financed residue analysis for glyphosate and other pesticides. For glyphosate, the data consistently showed that the levels of residue that were present 6 months after the application were as high as one would expect directly after the spraying. While 2 meters over, where the field was treated only for a short time, all levels were below the detection limit.
If the healthy and sick areas weren't directly next to each other, the increase in plant disease and soil infertility wouldn't have been noticeable because it happens so slowly. The farmers sought to increase their yields through using more fertilizer, which didn't help. An affected farmer prefers to stay anonymous. He received a threatening call. He shouldn't speak badly about glyphosate on camera. I realized, since I started to spray glyphosate, he says, that the dwarf virus began to spread dramatically. In dry years, it was extreme. On some fields, it caused a total yield loss. And there were years where the yield was 50% compared to the previous year.
But interestingly enough, this was only observed in the long-term treated areas and not where it was used for only 2 or 3 years.
The plant physiologist observes further effects on the plants, which until now had been overlooked.
With new molecular biological methods, we could show which genes are downregulated and that hormonal disturbances are occurring. There were also negative effects on physiological processes, which are part of the natural stress response. These were also downregulated in the damaged plants. There was also an impact on genes involved in water intake. These became less active and also hindered the extension of the lateral roots.
The official industry version claims glyphosate only inhibits a single enzyme. This is intentional and kills the unwanted plants. But Günther Neumann proved that glyphosate and its metabolites also change genes that are involved in root growth, water intake, and stress resistance. Under laboratory conditions, the scientists rule out other disruptive factors. The picture remains the same.
Here we see an unharmed wheat root system showing many fine roots. Over here is the same part of a damaged plant. It clearly shows far, far fewer fine roots.
This means that the treated plants don't take water in as efficiently. Nevertheless, the manufacturers continue to advertise that glyphosate helps fields to stay sustainably fertile, even in dry areas. 2 years after the publication of the Hohenheim data, the president of the German Farmers Association takes a stance on glyphosate. He's never heard of their findings.
Until now, there is no scientific evidence that glyphosate has negative effects on soil fertility. And in Germany, we apply glyphosate only to distinct areas in minimal amounts.
Joachim Buchwied represents 300,000 farmers in the Farmers Association. He's also president of the German lobby organization Forum of Modern Agriculture, where he represents glyphosate producers like Syngenta, Monsanto, and others. Near the Danish city of Aarhus, Ib Pedersen runs a modern livestock system with 4,000 pigs. In 2011, he became suspicious that his animals were becoming increasingly sick from their feed. As a pig farmer, he pays close attention to the health and fertility of his animals. Every sow that doesn't produce offspring is a business risk to a livestock operation. A normal litter of pigs is 15 piglets. His sows began to produce less and less. At the same time, the number of miscarriages and stillborn increased.
In here we have a pig born yesterday. It's born deformed, got an elephant man head. It's not finished in the top here. There's no cranium, it's just open to the brain. Luckily it was stillborn. We see more of these pigs with higher levels of glyphosate, lots more. I'll show you. Here we have another box. I have a whole freezer full at home as well. This is a pig that has got dual sex. It's got testicles and it has vagina. We have something gone wrong here. I know 14 children born in Denmark with deformities, at least 2 of them with spinal, or like this, where they have a patch that is not closed with the skin. They do take me, because I don't think this stops here. I think we've already seen this in humans.
So are there side effects for mammals after all? Pedersen gets scientific support. According to the field observations, the number of miscarriages has risen along the amount of glyphosate in the feed.
We made calculations on how many pigs is born deformed. If you have 1.13, you have 1 out of 529. And if you have 2.26 parts per million, you have 1 out of 240. It's actually linear increase from 0.1 parts per million until 2 parts per million. You can put a ruler on it, and it's very straight with the ruler. Higher doses, higher number of deformities.
After he changed to the glyphosate-free feed, the problems declined. To test his observation, he changed back to the glyphosate-containing feed once more.
This is the soya we have with high levels of glyphosate in it. You can't see it's glyphosate in it, but when we test it, it's quite high in glyphosate.
Perhaps overrated, but his pigs seem to like their feed less, whereas normally they're so hoggish. They also get diarrhea more often, which makes it necessary for him to use more antibiotics.
There we have. This is the type of diarrhea we see. We don't see that type of diarrhea when we have low levels or 0 levels of glyphosate in the food.
Also, researchers at the Danish Agricultural University of Aarhus express concerns about the high residual levels classified as harmless by the German authorities. Martin Tang Sorensen has been assigned to review the German BFR assessment.
Basically, they write that glyphosate in the feed for animals are no concern. We think that the concentrations are of concern because bacteria are affected.
Sorensen refers to a hidden side effect of glyphosate. It reduces the beneficial gut bacteria needed by all mammals.
So this patent on the effect of bacteria is even public. Anybody can Google it. It's more dangerous to the good guys in the gut. The balance of bacteria in the gut is disturbed towards the more bad guys, the pathogenic, at the expense of the good guys.
To his officially submitted concerns, he doesn't receive an answer. Although patented as an antibiotic, glyphosate was never approved as medicine. It primarily kills the beneficial bacteria. The harmful bacteria then take over and spread. How does the European Farmers Association protect its members from these potential dangers?
We are there to defend and well, not only to defend, but to be proactive also for their interests. I've never heard that it is patented as an antibiotic. If it's being patented as an antibiotic and it has antibiotic properties, it will probably have an effect on your soil life, and that could worry farmers. But again, when it comes to the risks associated with using glyphosate, we really follow the EFSA as the European authority and BFR the German authorities that assess the risk for glyphosate. And so far, they say it's harmless in the way we use it, and we benefit a lot from it. So that's why we will keep using it, of course, in a sustainable way.
Neither the European farmers nor the authorities were informed by the corporations about the antibiotic patent. Were other side effects also kept hidden? And do the field observations in Denmark influence the assessment in Germany?
After an assessment of all these reports, we ultimately arrive at the conclusion that we cannot infer a toxic effect of glyphosate on the development of organisms, nor a disruption of the endocrine system. This assessment will not be compromised by individual observations of a farmer in Denmark who manages a large pig farm. His detection methods for glyphosate do not comply with our analytical standard. He did not compare exposed pigs to non-exposed. Also, he did not take into account other possible causes, such as virus effects or the estrogen hormones contained within the soy itself.
Is the Danish farmer a mysterious one-off case, as he is dismissed as? Hundreds of German milk farmers encounter similar phenomena. Are these also isolated cases requiring no further official investigation? In southern Germany, Johannes Peter runs a family farm that produces milk for Allgäuer cheese with 90 animals.
The animals appear completely healthy. On the surface, you can't see anything. But they develop fertility problems which are a threat to our existence. As soon as they stop reproducing, they have to be taken out of the production cycle.
The cows are mainly fed natural hay and green grass fodder. That hasn't changed for generations on this farm.
Many cows had to be inseminated 4, 5, 6 times until they successfully reproduced. We didn't gain any support from the veterinarian, beside the usual application of artificial hormones, cyst treatment, or further inseminations, all of which didn't lead to significant improvements.
Diseases were ruled out. Yet the farmer also used concentrated feed as a supplement, including grains and soy from overseas.
It is impossible to buy concentrated feed without glyphosate residuals. It is used by all the different producers, which is provable. Yet nobody wants to test it, and no feed supplier guarantees their fodder is glyphosate-free.
He stopped buying pre-mixed concentrated feed and instead purchased locally produced feed from neighbors. 18 months later, he had a result he himself didn't expect.
Our statistics prove that after switching to glyphosate-free feed, the reproduction rates have doubled. We started out at 30% 1.5 years ago. Now we're at 60%.
Meanwhile, glyphosate continues to spread almost unnoticed through the entire modern food web. The port of Rotterdam is the main European gate for soy from overseas. How reliably is the testing for glyphosate residuals of the more than 30 million tons of soy arriving each year? Interview requests with the harbor authorities are declined. A pesticide expert network conducts their own research. In the Brussels Parliament, a hearing takes place about toxins and endocrine disruptors. Hans Müllermann has traced the hidden paths of herbicide residuals for years.
So I've been communicating with the national authorities about the testing of soybeans, which arrive in the port of Rotterdam, and they explained me that they have been testing, but the results are always far below what is allowed as the maximum level. In the last few years, there are only 2 samples taken on soybeans, the maximum allowable level is so high. So for them, there is no reason to test anymore, and they will not test anymore the soybeans in future. So all soybeans, the massive amounts of soybeans arriving in the port of Rotterdam, will be untested.
Thousands of tons of glyphosate-treated soy arrive every day. Most is processed on location into soybean meal and oil. Afterwards, any violation against maximum levels can no longer be traced to its shipment. At the University of Caen in France, the molecular biologist Gilles-Éric Seralini observed significant tumor formations in rats. As a previous expert at the French Risk Assessment Agency, he realized that the animal studies provided by the industries lasted only 3 months. To him, this appeared too short to be able to observe slow-developing chronic diseases. He starts an experiment. Over 24 months, he feeds rats Roundup containing corn pellets and water. The level of glyphosate is comparable to the level permitted for humans. After 4 months, tumors appear in the females and continue to grow. After 2 years, they're 5 times as big. Even for the cancer-prone lab animals, these are atypically high values.
What happened is that the tumors became hemorrhagic and they were pushing on vital organs, so the deaths were correlated to the size and to the tumors. That's what we saw. Not only that, but that we saw also the liver and kidney toxicity and the disruption of sexual hormones, including the pituitary dysfunctions and other problems of general toxicology in the bodies.
The gradual onset of tumor formation wasn't observable in the 3-month industry studies. Seralini's results cause an uproar. He works unscientifically, used the wrong rats, repeat industry-linked scientists, as well as the BFR.
The problem with Seralini's long-term study was that he only used 10 animals per dose group. He used a rat strain with a very high spontaneous tumor rate. The statistics weren't sufficient and the raw data wasn't documented.
The accusation was reprinted in all the newspapers, which hurt his reputation. Yet Seralini never claimed to have conducted an official cancer study, but a toxicology study investigating long-term effects. Further, he used the same rat strain and methods as industry scientists before. He just extended the exposure time.
We have to understand that we didn't perform a cancer study when we test for the first time a product, which was not the case before for a GMO or for a pesticide like we did in full formulation. You have to study all organs and all toxicological parameters. That's what we did. So for that, you have to measure 10 rats per group. That's what we did, according to the OECD norms and GLP practices.
Meanwhile, the BFR risk assessment, based mainly on industry studies, comes under attack.
The evaluation of safety of pesticides worldwide does not adhere to an open and transparent scientific review. Scientific reviews cannot be open and transparent as long as the details of critical studies are not publicly available. The procedures used to review the scientific evidence are also generally not available. They are for BFR, or they're generally cryptic and difficult to interpret.
WHO experts see grave deficiencies in the BFR risk assessment, including the neglect of international standards.
The BFR document that I have seen has been consistently used to negate positive animal studies. There is a process, it's not rocket science, there's a process that has been in place over 40 years on how to conduct very well designed animal studies. Discounting a positive animal study because the dose is irrelevant to human exposure, this is the first time in my professional career I see a risk assessment agency doing that.
The WHO scientists take a second look at several studies that were declared not reliable by BFR.
In cancer, we have what we call the 10 key characteristics of human carcinogenesis. And these are the 10 key things that we believe chemicals and environmental factors and agents in the environment do to start the cancer process So oxidative stress is a potential precursor for cancer, and seeing study after study where glyphosate induces oxidative stress suggests that that could strengthen the overall cancer finding.
All of the evidence is rejected by BFR. Chris Portier encountered a similar neglect in the USA.
EPA reviewed the same animal evidence as us, initially concluding there was evidence of carcinogenicity from that animal evidence. They presented that finding to their science advisory panel, which is an outside panel of scientists, who then felt that that was too strong of a statement and wanted the EPA to reevaluate it again. And in the end, EPA chose to discard those studies as being not relevant and listed as suggestive of no evidence of cancer, which we would definitely, I personally would very much disagree on.
In reality, the BFR assessment had been pre-formulated by the glyphosate task force of the industry. The BFR simply shortened or added comments in italics. Critical studies get rated as not reliable. In the USA, the permitted residual levels are even higher. Officially, no one talks about possible side effects. Veterinarian Art Dunham has treated farm animals for over 40 years in Iowa. He realized that with the increase of glyphosate residues, cows became pregnant less often.
Bred, too. No palpable cyst, feels normal, small CL on the right, she's open.
The fertility problems are occurring across the nation.
She sure doesn't have she feels not like I need to give her Prostin, but she doesn't feel like a virgin heifer anymore. Yeah. So yeah, she's open. She isn't going to cycle back for some time. Yeah.
As the Danish and German farmers before, the veterinarian observes that the fertility problems decrease again if the feed is changed to glyphosate-free. A connection to any hormonal side effects of glyphosate is not officially recognized.
We share some of the same enzyme systems as plants and insects. And then when you're using a broad spectrum chelator, endocrine disrupting substance as a herbicide, it seems kind of foolhardy to not do any long-term testing. But our problem is, see, we have very few people with the determination and the drive and the guts and the funding to fight the politics of business and science.
The veterinarian orders independent tests of feed and straw.
Infertility is documented by our CDC as increasing in humans, and the same is occurring and documented in our literature in animals, and it seems to correlate with more and more use of glyphosate-based herbicides.
Health statistics show that parallel to the increase of glyphosate use, there is an increase of infertility, thyroid disorders, liver and kidney and other diseases. Officially, the U.S. government does not acknowledge any possible connection. The glyphosate test samples provide another surprise.
This is their summary sheet for 300-some samples for the 4 different Fusarium mycotoxins. And when they tried to identify the molds, 32% of them were Fusarium, and then 52% were penicillium. If that's in the silage, it's also in some of the grain going into the ethanol plant that's going to be made into human edible stuff. The T2 is one of the most toxic things known to man. It rates right up there with aflatoxin, ricin, Agent Orange. It's over 100 parts per billion is bad news.
In these regions, the biological toxins used to be rare, but they're spreading. A link to glyphosate has never been officially investigated, although sufficient indicators exist, according to plant pathologist Don Huber, a leading expert for biological toxins who was the chairman of the National Plant Disease Recovery Program until 2011 and still consults farmers today. Huber and attentive farmers noticed that the microbial soil life slowly but surely has steadily declined. At farm shows, they compare different soil types, treated and untreated. Each gram of soil contains about 40 million bacteria, which are essential for the conversion of potassium, calcium, manganese, and other minerals into valuable nutrients.
Look at the aggregation of the soil.
Invisible to the naked eye, the beneficial bacteria also keep the spreading of toxin-producing bacteria in check, and thereby keeps soil healthy.
When you apply glyphosate, it's high antibiotic activity against the good bacteria that would suppress a lot of these other organisms, gives the disease organisms then an opportunity to become a real serious problem for us.
In the United States, the bacterial-caused corn disease Goss's wilt was confined to Nebraska and Colorado. In the last 2 years, it spread more than 1,000 kilometers to Indiana and beyond. The pathogenic bacteria infiltrate the whole plant.
All through here. It's a systemic disease.
And then right next to it, the plant, it's showing the Goss's symptoms with huge thumbprint, and I got at least 3 or 4 different diseases.
How many fungicide applications have been applied?
This had 1 fungicide application.
The corn, weakened by the bacteria, has also become susceptible to other pathogens that weren't a problem before. Around the same time, the economically important soybeans have also been hit by new waves of plant disease. Don Huber and farmer Keith Schlepkohl take a closer look.
See the sudden deaths showing starting here. The yellowing.
The yellow patches appear suddenly within the normally green soy fields. The disease sudden death syndrome causes up to 40% yield loss.
Say in the last 6 to 8 years, it's gotten more prevalent. With longer-term glyphosate usage, it gets worse and worse. Can you explain why?
Well, because of the symptoms that you see on the leaves. It's a physiologic disturbance, like you would get with the toxin. Since the fusarium is associated with it, but the fusarium stays in the root system.
Fusarium is a class of microscopic fungus. Most subspecies are harmless, but toxin-producing forms also exist. With the decline of beneficial bacteria and fungi, the toxic fusarium multiplies and spreads, causing sudden death.
So we favored the pathogens, and fusarium is one of those that attacks all of our other crops also. You start seeing these symptoms, you start seeing the defoliation, and then everything is going downhill rather than uphill for you. These beans should be twice that size. There's no photosynthesis, there's no energy, so that we've lost probably 4 to 5 weeks of actually very important crop production cycle.
Much of this soy is exported to Europe and China, including the diseases it may have. Bob Streit belongs to a task force which compares the spread of toxic fungal diseases in countries with high glyphosate use.
And what American farmers have done is they're using the same herbicide in corn and in soybeans 16 years straight. And that's just plain a recipe for disaster. As far as why they did it, it was easy, it was cheap, and it was sold to them as a cure-all.
He consults farmers, and it's not just sudden death that gives them problems.
The way I understand it, there's not much of a depletion between what's actually in here in this seed and what's actually what we ingest as humans. Our Food and Drug Administration wouldn't be sharing information with other countries, and I know if word gets out, it affects the trade, and I think that's the whole purpose of why they're keeping things quiet.
More and more glyphosate-resistant plants appear, bearing up to 1 million seeds each. They're no longer controllable by the pesticide. The so-called superweeds spread rapidly. The first species that are resistant to all available pesticides have already appeared.
No farm magazine wants to touch the issue. No newspaper and no broadcaster wants to talk about the number one cause of the problem.
Officially, no investigations are launched to evaluate such distressing observations. A label requirement for glyphosate does not exist on food products. The official claim is that glyphosate is excreted by the human body within a very short period of time. The organization Moms Across America is concerned.
The American government tells us that our milk is safe, and we mothers want to know if our breast milk is safe. So when we found out the best available testing had 75 parts per billion of a detectability level, we did not think we would find glyphosate in breast milk, but we did. We found 76 parts per billion in Virginia and 166 parts per billion in Florida. This is absolutely shocking because these levels are, the 166 is 1,600 times higher than is allowed in the drinking water in Europe. And this is 3,000 times higher than what Seralini has shown to be harmful in his study, which includes liver and kidney damage and sex hormone changes. And in our urine, in my children's urine as well, 8.7 parts per billion was in my son. And this was at the same time as a sudden onset of autism symptoms. He had a rash around his mouth, he was hitting, his grades dropped, he had erratic behavior, and he was tested positive for fungus, C. diff, Clostridia, bacteria.
Is her assumption of a link with glyphosate mere speculation? The U.S. research project Human Microbiome showed that only through an alteration of gut bacteria, autism can be replicated. Epidemiological numbers show that with the increase of glyphosate, bowel diseases and autism increased. A coincidence?
So we cleaned up his diet, we retested him in 6 weeks, and his glyphosate levels were no longer detectable, and his autism symptoms were gone, and they've never come back.
Authorities and the industry reject the results of the breast milk study, saying the testing methods were not validated according to international standards.
This lab had the best available testing that we could find. Now, critics may criticize the lab and the testing that we chose, but I urge you to ask yourself or our government, why is a mom having to do this testing? Why isn't our government doing it? Why wasn't the chemical company who manufactures these chemicals doing it? Why weren't the food companies doing it? Why aren't the baby formula companies doing this?
Were these independent breast milk findings a unique case? In 18 European cities, glyphosate is measured in random urine samples. A correlation to the increase of modern diseases is not investigated. In 2015, 16 mothers in Germany also have their breast milk tested for a study for the Green Party. Maria Lustig takes part. The test results astound her and her husband, a doctor.
I was surprised that glyphosate appeared in my milk and that it was even detected. Because through my lifestyle choices, I try to prevent the intake of such things.
Safety limits are safety limits. Some authority defined those at some point. You're at 0.2 and the safety limit is 0.1. This justifies further questioning.
That it appears in the milk means that it's absorbed in the body and not completely excreted.
The test has been designed to detect glyphosate. If there are doubts about the testing methods, the authorities should perform larger tests with bigger samples.
If we see that we have already reached the limits in Europe, what will happen if TTIP goes further? And the American limits become acceptable in Germany? That's concerning.
This breast milk study is also called into question, as the president of the BFR reports to the Agricultural Committee.
It is difficult to deal with cases when something gets measured. We experienced this firsthand when hundreds of concerned mothers called us whether they should stop weaning, all because of a study that was performed without a validated method, which therefore could not deliver any of the results it claimed.
Again, a critical study is found to be unscientific. At the same time, the BFR admits to have never examined the complete pesticide product as used in the field.
The analysis of many studies affirms that according to our current scientific knowledge, if properly used, no carcinogenic, reproductive, or embryotoxic effects through glyphosate are to be expected. Our analysis is only for the isolated substance glyphosate and not for the herbicide formulations as they're applied in practice.
In each glyphosate product, glyphosate is only one of 20 or more chemical compounds that form a complex cocktail. The other ingredients are up to 1,000 times more toxic than glyphosate alone. The German BFR acknowledges this and proposed to investigate the other formulants as well. Yet the mixture of compounds is considered a trade secret, and BFR's attempts were not supported. One of the few worldwide who performs the detective work and analyzes the other ingredients is the French scientist Seralini.
The industry doesn't publish and doesn't say what's in the mixture of the pesticide, but we analyze them very nicely by the most potent methods. They are 1,000 times more toxic, and below that levels, they are endocrine disruptors. So that means that they have hormonal effects that can even induce breast cancer afterwards, or hormonal-dependent diseases.
In practice, glyphosate is never sold as an isolated compound, but always mixed together with far more toxic ingredients. These weren't included in the European risk assessment. Even Seralini's discoveries were recognized by the BFR this time.
The publications of the French group of Professor Seralini confirm our suspicions that we expressed in the year 2000, that the other ingredients are more toxic than glyphosate. They show this using methods that we are now validating in our own research lab.
The BFR is currently standardizing the experimental setup used by Seralini to be able to assess the other ingredients in the future. Despite their knowledge that their own assessment procedures are still incomplete, BFR continues to dismiss research that already includes any of the other compounds. This is how, next to glyphosate, a whole palette of untested toxic formulants finds their way into the food web. Ironically, Seralini is attacked by industry and government agencies specifically for assessing the risk of the entire pesticide formulation instead of glyphosate alone.
I will not die comfortably if I do not say the truth or I do not say what I have found. I think that I do not care really about Monsanto or Syngenta or others. I'm just interested in the combined effect of pollutants on health. And if I am afraid for something, it's because of the life lost of all the children all over the world by these compounds.
Despite his achievements, his funds are reduced. To support his team, he started a crowdfunding campaign.
Of course, we produce substances which are toxic. It's always a question of whether one is more toxic than the other. Glyphosate has a relatively low level of toxicity as a chemical substance within our company. Of course, if something has a higher level of toxicity, then we must say it is more toxic. But if glyphosate is on the lower end of the ranking, then everything else is more toxic. Right.
Already in the year 2000, the BFR proposed to the EU to investigate the risks of the other chemical formulants used within commercial glyphosate products, but never got an official assignment, and therefore no money to do it. What kept the administration in Brussels from approving the investigation of the other toxic ingredients? The Lobby Observatory Organization's CEO takes a look behind the scenes. Agricultural safety has become a major topic of the secretly held TTIP negotiations between Europe and the US.
So through Freedom of Information Acts, we receive documents from the Commission that show how close the European Commission and industry are cooperating. And basically, the European Commission asking business to be more vocal in defending TTIP to the public and saying TTIP is not about dismantling existing EU chemicals regulation, whereas actually that is exactly what they are trying to do in their proposals from the industry. All these chemicals are allowed in the US and not in the EU. For instance, here glyphosate on asparagus is 0.5 milligram per kilogram, whereas in the EU it is 0.01.
To understand decision-making in Brussels, it helps to look at lobby structures.
Lobby consultancy Fleischmann & Hiller, they are here, together with a host of other organizations and corporations, as is usual in Brussels. So this is a lobby consultancy that works, among others, for Monsanto and Bayer, and that shows that while it seems that they are competitors, actually they have the same lobby consultancies, also called hired gun lobby firms, to work for them, to target the EU institutions with lobby events or lobbying papers. So in the end, it's all very connected. Fleischmann Hiller is there, Bayer is over there. They're all very close together.
Yet details about negotiations on the harmonization of risk assessments remain unknown. Meanwhile, the WHO forms a new task force to reassess the critical cancer findings published earlier by their own cancer experts. The new task force is headed by Roland Soletsky of the BFR. He therefore leads the re-evaluation of his own criticized work. The preliminary result looks positive. The European Food and Safety Authority, which also employs former lobbyists in leading positions, immediately recommends to raise the permitted glyphosate limits. This conflict is not just about food and safety. Outside Europe, 90% of all genetically modified crops are resistant and dependent on glyphosate. For GMO corporations like Monsanto, Syngenta, Bayer, and others, this is also about the defense of their worldwide billion-dollar GMO business, which without glyphosate products would collapse. Meanwhile, Monsanto has commissioned a scientific company who, it is said, could prove that the critical review by the cancer experts of the WHO is nothing but junk science.